Hello and welcome to our presentation on what is data warehousing all about, updated for 2012, and this presentation is for business managers. My name is Peter Nolan and I'm the founder of Instant Business Intelligence. The agenda for this presentation is to first provide an introduction to the 2012 update. Then what we'll talk about is what is it that you want really if you're a business manager in a significant sized organization. We're going to talk about what is a data warehouse all about, what is the management decision-making process, what is the role of the data warehouse, what were people saying about data warehousing in the 90s and how applicable is that today, and we're going to talk about what do we perceive went so wrong in so many data warehouse projects, and then talk about how to make it go right. This presentation is the briefest of three presentations presenting similar information, and it is intended for the business audience as well as the IT audience. The original version of this presentation was written in 1994 and it was based on a presentation by Keith Fountain of Metaphor in 1993. Keith made this presentation to many prospects in Sydney when I invited him to come and talk to our IBM insurance clients in Sydney in 1993. I upgraded versions of this presentation for 10 years and presented it to many business managers. Typically when business managers read this presentation or hear this presentation, they get it, and they get it very quickly. Now that it's 2012, I've decided to upgrade it and release it because this is as relevant today as it was nearly 20 years ago, and this is a valuable presentation that belongs in the public domain in the YouTube age. Now, my own opinion is that we have not moved forward nearly as far as I expected in 1993. In data volumes, yes, and in data models, yes, but the ability and desire of business people to exploit the data warehouse has gone down, in my opinion, and I discuss that in more detail in the other presentations. For this presentation, I will merely say that in my opinion, the capability and capacity and the desire of business analysts working for senior business managers like yourself does seem to have declined over the last 15 years. Now, if you're a business manager in a sizable business, what do you really want? What you should want is improved profitability with sustainable growth over the long term, because that's the driver of shareholder value. In those cases, business managers are paying attention to both revenue and costs. They're looking for new opportunities to grow revenue, but also looking for opportunities to trim waste and trim cost as and where appropriate. Business managers are looking for improved decision-making capability so that in the decisions that they're making more effective decisions more often, and the cumulative effect of more effective decisions more often is improved profitability with sustainable growth, regardless of what the external environment is doing. This implies that there is a consistent set of measures of business performance which can be applied over time such that the business manager can understand what is doing well and what is doing poorly, even over such things as organizational changes to the sales hierarchy, which is very common in most organizations. The thing we say about that is profit is a fact, it's not an opinion. So these measures have to be built and measured consistently across time. Further, in the last 20 years, there's been a great deal of compliance legislation passed by governments. We all know about Sarbanes-Oxley, and we all know about Basel in the finance industry. So governments can put you out of business if you don't comply. Now, there are other areas of what companies really want, but those are the highlights. So, the next thing I want to talk about is communicate to you as a business manager what data warehousing or business intelligence is really all about. Now, you may know this and you may think that I'm repeating myself, and that's great if you do, but my experience has been that the vast majority of business managers never stop to think about this during the business intelligence project. The data warehouse is all about supporting the management decision-making process. It's that simple and that complicated. You may also read that as the business intelligence system is all about supporting the management decision-making process. Now, we say it's simple and it's complicated for two reasons. That is a very simple sentence, supporting the management decision-making process. But what is that process? Well, that process is nothing like the manufacture of a widget. Uh, Many companies manufacture products or deliver services, and their products and services are well understood. They're well understood in the sales process, through the delivery process, through the returns process, or any dispute process. And the computer systems that are required to support those processes are relatively easy to understand. However, the management decision-making process is far from so easy to understand. Management decision-making process is a much softer process. It's a people-oriented process. It is a highly politicized process, whether we like to admit that it is a highly politicized process or not. And it does not lend itself to repeatable, systemized uh, solutions. So when there's not a repeatable systematized solution available, how do you develop a computer system to support such processes? And so it's rather more difficult to support the management decision-making process than it is the manufacture, distribution, and selling process of whatever widgets. So this was a presentation that Keith Fountain did in front of me as far back as 1993, and because it is so useful, I'm repeating it here. So I'm not taking credit for it. It was definitely Metaphor's material, but it's been very useful in explaining business intelligence and data warehousing for 20 years now. So what is the management decision-making process? Let's have a nice simple breakdown of it. First of all, your average business manager is asking the question, how's business? He's had to submit his business plan, he's had to get his budget approved, and now that the year is underway, he needs to analyze, is the business performing as I expected it to perform? And this is the land of dashboards or red, amber, green desktops and things like that, where the plan versus actual is put onto the chart, and if it's um, below variance, it'll be coloured in red, and if it's above variance, it'll be coloured in green, and if it's inside variance, it'll be coloured some neutral colour, generally some kind of amber colour. So you have these red, amber, green desktops or similar. Stephen Few has got things called bullet charts, and Edward Tufte has things called spark lines, and all these things are going on to dashboards now. And these are all names and things that business managers should know now. So the business manager has got his reports or dashboards or whatever it is that show him his plan versus actual for his span of control within an organization. And when a light turns red, or indeed when a light turns green, the first question that should pop into the business manager's head is, well, why is it like that? Can I find out a cause for why this report is showing red, why this particular factor is showing red? Or indeed, why is this particular factor showing green? Because it may be something that's good and that we can replicate in other areas of the organization, or it may be that we accidentally gave a low estimate and it appears to be better than it is because we mistakenly gave it a low estimate. Now, the obvious saying is that the devil is in the detail, and the Y area is the land of operational systems capturing data about what's happening within the organization, and you can hunt around inside this operational data using a variety of tools to determine the causal factors which are making a light turn red or indeed making a light turn green. Now, having found out, let's say sales are down in a specific widget in a specific area, you've come to the conclusion that you know why that is the case. So the obvious question is, do we want to do anything about it? And if so, what do we do about it? And this is the land of what if. And the land of what if is absolutely the land of the spreadsheet. And so people, business analysts, develop spreadsheets for various investment opportunities to alter and change the business or marketing opportunities, and they go to management to get approval for the budgets for these things. Now, in the what if area, most managers prefer to have a low, medium, high cost, low, medium, high impact proposal for any particular area which is found to be underperforming. That way, as they are doing their work at deciding which projects go forward and which projects don't go forward, they can balance the estimates of high, medium, low impact for the different areas, and so they're not faced with a binary choice of, do I do this or not do this? They're faced with a choice of, I've got some options in this area, and in this area I pick low. I've got some options in another area. In that area I pick medium, and in another area I pick high. And so there's always many more proposals to be done than there is budget available to do them. And so one of the most important roles of a business manager is when he's trying to effect change in his span of control, he needs to understand the likely impact of that change, because good change in one area can become bad change in another area. And so it's very important that these decisions are thoroughly researched and the implications of the decisions are thoroughly researched, and that it's all captured and made available. Now, naturally, the larger the budget being requested and the larger the scope of change being requested, the higher up the hierarchy that decision has to go to be made. And the highest level decisions are obviously made in the boardroom, with the biggest budgets, the biggest impacts, the biggest risks being taken at boardroom level in terms of decisions. Now, at the end of the what if process comes the actual decision point. At that point, at the tip of that arrow, is yes, we've made a decision. We are going to actually do something different. And that requires an investment, not only in money, but in people and time and training, and often systems changes and things like that. So this investment needs to happen before anything actually changes out there in the business. So some investment happens, some change happens, maybe some new salesmen, maybe a new sales process, maybe a new product, maybe a discontinuance of a product, maybe some product packaging changes and things like that. So the investment is made, and the obvious question after the investment is made is, well, how did that turn out? How's business again? And the investment that was made should show an impact on the reports demonstrating or displaying how business is. And then the whole cycle starts again. So the management decision-making process, taking the political side out of it, can be somewhat well described as how's business, why is it like that, what if we did something different, decision point, let's invest the money and make a change to the business, and let's see how that worked out. Now, for you business managers, this cycle has another name, and the name for this cycle is competitive advantage. The speed at which you go around this cycle can give you a sustained competitive advantage if you go around it fast enough. That is, if you can go around this cycle significantly faster than your competitors, then it barely matters what decisions you make, because you can adjust the direction of the ship, so to speak, more quickly than anybody else. So going around the decision cycle faster is in and of itself a competitive advantage, and something that you should be striving for. Now, what does a data warehouse look like in 2012? You're a business manager, so you don't need to worry about that too much. Just make sure your IT people are familiar with this book and with this diagram. So for a business manager, the only thing you need to know is that your IT people have read this book, understand this diagram, and are working to this kind of architecture or plan in some way, shape, or form. Now, what is the role of the data warehouse? The role of the data warehouse is to be central to the management decision-making process in order to support it. So you have house business, which is dashboards or reports. You have Y, which is detailed operational system data. You have what if, which is the land of the spreadsheet, which also must go into here. You have the decision point, and the data from the decision point must go into here. And then you have the investment that occurs, which must be recorded to go back to house business again. The data warehouse must be central to the management decision-making process. Now, I just want to very briefly touch on what people were saying about data warehousing, and I want you to remember that this was in the 90s. Computer World. The business case for warehouses is simple. They help turn data into a competitive tool. Tom Peters. We are living through a shift from selling virtually everyone the same thing a generation ago to fulfilling individual needs and tastes by supplying customized products and services. The shift is from get the sale now at any cost to building and managing databases that track the lifetime value of your relationship with each customer. Rapp and Collins. It may almost be time to replace location, location, location with database, database, database. Stanley Davis, Future Perfect, in his book Mass Customization, standardize the commodity and customize the service that surround it. And the best example of that is telephone calls, where the product is as commoditized as you can be, but all the telephone companies have all these packages around the telephone call and now internet and data, and they all look different. So it's the packaging that is customized and the call that is commoditized. Philip Kotler in Marketing Management. Mass markets are fragmenting into micro markets. Multiple channels of distribution are replacing single channels. The winners are those who carefully analyze needs, identify opportunities, and create value-laden offers for target customer groups that competitors can't match. And if that doesn't scream iPod, I don't know what does. IDC. Perhaps the single most important ongoing occurrence to affect data warehousing has been the information explosion. Organizations realize that given the fundamental relationship between knowledge and power, utilization of this information is key to their competitive positioning. And if you can believe this, that statement was written before the World Wide Web existed. And the web, tools like Google and Facebook, etc., have definitely created another information explosion. Metagroup. Bottom line, data warehouses are an increasingly critical component of the systems that support the ever-increasing tempo of business competition. Now, let us just take a checkpoint, and you are a business manager in a sizable business, perhaps a senior business manager. We just saw some very strong comments made in the 90s about data warehousing, which you could call business intelligence now. I made many similar comments myself. But you, as a business manager, how many of you listening to this can honestly say that your company has been able to gain very significant competitive advantage and sustain that competitive advantage via data warehousing and business intelligence? You saw the comments that were made by some of the world's leading business consultants in the early 90s. You saw what they were saying about data warehousing. Well, in your firm, was this delivered on? In my experience, there are very, very few business managers who are prepared to say, we got those sort of benefits that were being talked about out of our business intelligence systems. Yes, there may have been some value out of the business intelligence system, but a sustained competitive advantage, very few companies have been able to get to that position. And it's worth asking the question, why were the promised benefits not realized? We also say that with the consolidation of BI vendors, there will be even fewer companies in the future. So, in my opinion, and this might be controversial to you being a business manager, not enough senior business managers listened closely enough to those of us who knew what we were talking about when they were implementing business intelligence systems. There was quite a high likelihood that the senior business managers would delegate the creation of the business intelligence systems off to the IT folks and have very little to do with it. And very often it was seen as a very IT-focused project. And that created enough troubles in and of itself. Further, in the late 90s, as business intelligence boomed and there were many jobs available in it, every man and his dog hung out his shingle as a BI consultant. And many of them did not even know how to spell business intelligence, and the problem was that many customers could not tell the difference between those of us who'd paid our dues and developed our skills and were highly proficient at what it was that we were doing, versus the men who hung their shingle out saying, I'm a BI consultant, hire me. See, I've got a nice slide deck, I know what I'm talking about. There was a lot of those people about. Now, because that happened, men like me were trying to bring in standards and demonstrate to clients what it is that a BI consultant should know before you hire them. so that we wouldn't suffer the rush of fools, as it were. Unfortunately, we were mostly widely ignored, and the rush of fools happened anyway. Now, business intelligence has become, in many ways, write more reports, and I would argue, write more useless reports in a lot of cases. Many people have become enamored with sexy charts, the latest chart type, the latest way of presenting information visually. And there are a lot of very interesting tools out there which present information in a lot of different ways. But becoming enamored with the data, with the visualization of data without actually understanding what the data is telling you, or without understanding how that information can be applied to adjust the business processes of an organization to improve the profitability of that organization, does not actually deliver you any significant great value. The visualization of data is important, but the understanding of how to alter the organization is far more important. Today, many people are discouraged from looking for competitive advantage, and because they are not looking for competitive advantage, they obviously do not find it. And in many ways, we've snatched defeat from the jaws of victory in the vast majority of BI projects, and your company may be one of those. Now, this obviously begs the question, if these things have been going wrong on a regular basis, how do we make them go right? And I will only provide a short synopsis here of these two anecdotes and Metaphor. But Metaphor was a company that was a very successful business intelligence company in the early 90s, which was bought by IBM and did not fare well in that acquisition, as many acquisitions by IBM have not fared well. And Metaphor because of the times, had an almost pathological focus on the management decision-making process and the information needed to support the decisions that management were making. And they had the tagline Metaphor, everywhere smart decisions are made. And so, because of this focus on the management decision-making process and this focus on putting the data that made smart decisions possible, Metaphor did very well. Now, this is best explained in two anecdotes, and I will do these anecdotes very briefly in this presentation. There's more information for your IT guys. One was at a major Australian company with two prior failed BI projects, where I was awarded the project, my team was awarded the project third time lucky. In the business requirements discussion, a comment was made, do you realize the product is different every week? Now, this was a publisher of magazines, and primarily women's magazines. So we were doing this business requirements discovery process, and somebody said to me, do you realize the product is different every week? And I said, no, I don't realize that because I don't read women's magazines. So please explain that to me in more detail. And just for brevity's sake in this presentation, the explanation is, well, if we have a photograph of Charles and Diana, being the 90s, on the front page, we also put articles which will appeal to people who are interested in Charles and Diana, and we make that product for that week. Now, if we put a picture of Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman on the front of the magazine, and we have articles which appeal to people who like Tom and Nicole, those two magazines are significantly different. Many of the same people will buy both magazines, but many people will buy the first one and not the second one, and many people buy the second one and not the first one. Do you understand? And I went, yes, that makes sense, because if you like the royal family, etc., you are likely or possible to not be so into Tom and Nicole as Hollywood superstars, right? And so that made a lot of sense. And I went and verified that comment in that discussion with the editors of many of the magazines, and they told me that that was true. Particularly true in the women's magazines area, less true in the men's magazines area, but still quite true. The issue was that the ERP could not implement allocations, that is, how many copies of each magazine to send to each of the outlets, by prior selected weeks of or months of magazine. It just forecast based on the last N issues. What this was doing for their business was giving them too many oversupplies, and an oversupply is you have too many magazines left at the end of the week, and too many sellouts, which is you run out of the magazine well before the end date of the magazine. And so their distribution was not so great, and the ERP system was not able to modify this distribution model. So when we talked with the finance director about the cost drivers of the organisation, we found that print, paper, and distribution for their organisation was about 30% of the cost of the publication, and therefore saving the print distribution for copies that were never sold was a good idea. And the most significant idea we implemented then was to do the calculation of the number of copies to be distributed to each distribution point in the data warehouse and not in the ERP, which couldn't do it as we wanted it to be done. But the reason that I'm talking about that is it's an absolute business process, a business decision process of how many copies get shipped to each distribution center. And there were 7,000 distribution points. That's a business management decision making process. How do we create our decision process for the distribution of our product? Now, anecdote two is from Qantas Cargo, Qantas being the airline in Australia, and then they, because there is only one Qantas Cargo in Australia, they made the decision that it seemed like a good idea that they would get their internal people to do the BI project. However, the BI people from internal to the company failed the first two times, and my group was again engaged, third time lucky, to make the project work. In this case, we soon got some complaints from the senior management team, which was absolutely normal and didn't bother me at all, about the process we were using to understand the business. And the complaints were about we weren't asking about what data do we need to make decisions and what reports should we have to make these decisions and what should these reports look like and what should be the frequency of the reports and what data should be on the reports. And because we weren't asking them the same questions as they were used to being asked, the senior managers were complaining. And I had an interview or a meeting with the CEO of Qantas Cargo where I explained to him that if we did the same as what the previous two teams had done, we should expect the same result, which was a failure. And I told him that I was the best person in the country for this job, and that's why we used a different process and we knew what we were doing. And Keith was wondering about just how arrogant I was, but he let the process continue. At week 8, we did a prototype and we showed what we thought the senior management team needed and what their analysts needed on their desks in a prototype with real data, but test data from the operational systems. And we took them through that for about half an hour. At the end of that half an hour, the CEO of Qantas Cargo, Keith, looked at me and he said, "Now, Peter, I know that you have no experience in cargo, but what I saw just demonstrated that you now have a profound understanding of our business. And I'd like to know, how did you do that?" And I said, "Keith, 6 weeks ago you invited me to your office to talk about concerns of your management team sitting here today about the process that we use in understanding your business. And we didn't do things like you had expected us to do. And I told you at that meeting that I was the best person in the country at this job. Remember?" And he nodded and said yes. I said, "The reason that I now have a profoundly deep understanding of how you do your business in cargo is exactly because I am the best person at this job in the country, and what your business managers were able to share with me in those discussions enabled me to understand your business better than your own people who tried to build your business intelligence system." And Keith sort of smiled and nodded and said, "Yes, okay, now we understand." A different approach was required. So the approach that I used was very much focused on the management decision-making process. That project went on to deliver and was called the most successful project ever done in Qantas Cargo. So how did I make it go right? What was it that I did different? I was focused on the management decision-making process. I looked for the decisions being made in the company that affect both revenue and costs. I looked forward what the strategy and plan was for the business over the next 2 or 3 years, and what information would be needed to support that strategy and plan over the next 2 or 3 years. Then we went back to the operational systems and we gathered up the data that we knew would support those decisions, both plan and actual. And the point I want to make to you as a business manager is that is not rocket science. Going to a business manager and talking to him about his business and what he's trying to do and what his scope of responsibility is and what the drivers of his business are, both costs and revenues, is not rocket science. It's actually a fairly simple thing to do once you know how to do it. But as far as I know, very few people do this. So when you, as a business manager, getting your IT people to get some consultants in to do a data warehouse project or a BI project or the next version thereof, ask the consultants for proof that they do this and consider replacing them if they fail this test. So back in the 90s, if every time a management decision is being made, data from the data warehouse is mandatory in that decision, you're going to have a successful project. That means plans and forecast are a natural and required part of the warehouse. Plans versus actual are not optional in a good data warehouse. Capturing the reasons for the variance is not optional. Multiple versions of plans or forecasts is not optional. Recording investment decisions is not optional. Being able to run business process change tests is not optional. Being able to run test campaigns is not optional. These are all things that as early as the late 90s we knew and understood were not optional. And recording virtually everything you can lay your hands on was very desirable. Now update that for the tens, which we may say we're in 2012. All the above, plus today there are good data models available. Now as a business manager you won't know much about that except to ask your IT people, do these guys have an industry standard data model that we know has been implemented in other places? It's a very good idea to also have applications to build. You as a business manager should be asking about what segmentation engines and how does the vendor have and how do they work. And if there aren't segmentation engines there, you should be questioning that. You should be asking about how does the vendor make customization fast and easy, and you should be asking about does the vendor have a methodology that is consistent with the tools that they are proposing. And you should be talking about does the vendor focus on supporting decisions wherever smart decisions might generate business profit. These are the sort of things that make the data warehouse go right. You as a business manager should also be putting pressure on people to be coming up with new ideas of things that haven't been done before rather than just more operational reporting from the data warehouse. You should be asking your IT people to make sure that the vendors or their own staff use some kind of business framework. We prefer to use the Strategic Information Alignment Framework from Donald Marchand's book, Competing with Information. And if you're a senior business manager, we highly recommend this book to you. So in summary, that's just coming up 34 minutes. This presentation, I gave you an introduction to the 2012 update. We talked very briefly about what do businesses really want, and it should be sustainable, profitable growth over a long period of time because that affects shareholder value. We talked about what is the data warehouse all about, and it's all about supporting the management decision-making process. We talked briefly about what are people saying about data warehousing, and that was from the 90s. And arguably, not so many companies have been able to implement and get working what was talked about in the 90s. So I talked a little bit about what went so wrong on so many projects, and then conversely, given that I brought up some projects, indeed the majority of projects do go wrong, how do you make those projects go right? And gave you some brief information about how you make those projects go right. Now, this is a 35-minute presentation. It's a very high-level presentation for business managers. I've gone through it relatively quickly. My speed of my voice has been relatively quick through this whole presentation. There are two other presentations of the similar content. One is the abbreviated version, which is 90 minutes, and one is the full detailed version, which is 2 hours, which is available to your IT staff for them to go and listen to. You too, of course, are welcome to go and listen to those, although they do have some IT stuff in them which you may not fully understand. But you should also make sure that your IT staff go and view at least the abbreviated presentation, and maybe one or two of them see the full version, because this is good, valuable information that's being put out via the wonders of YouTube that I presented to very large numbers of companies during the 90s and gave up by the mid-2000s. Now it's 2012, and the age of YouTube, I'm putting this information out into the public domain for the benefit of all. Now, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this presentation. I really appreciate it. I hope it was of value. Naturally, if there is something that we can do for you, please drop us a note or give us a call. We're always on the lookout for clients who we can actually contribute to, who are interested in what it is that we have to say. So once again, thank you very much for your time.